In this video, we're going to be talking about disc brakes and how to fit a brand new disc brake from scratch. Now I've got my bike prepped and ready to go, and I'm going to be fitting a Shimano SLX disc brake. So as you can see here, I've got everything prepped and ready to go. I've got my brake set out the box. I've also got my center lock disc rotor. I've got the end cap as well for that, the brake mount and the 2 bolts. And on this wheel set, you can see it's actually a center lock as well. You might have a 6-bolt system. You can actually check out a video that we've already done just on putting the 6-bolt or a center lock rotor. So all you're going to need to carry out this process is a set of Allen keys. I've got a 2.5, a 3, a 4 and a 5, and you're also going to need a center lock BB tool. These are the tools that you're going to need if your brake is pre-cut and you're just putting it onto the bike. If you're actually going to cut it afterwards and then have to bleed the system, then you should check out another video on how to bleed your Shimano disc brake. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm actually going to put my center lock disc rotor on. Now it's quite easy to do so. We've done a video on it, as I already said. You want to pop that on top, and you actually want to make sure that that writing's facing up the way. Slide it on. So I'm now just going to put the lock nut on. You might actually already have some Loctite on there. If you don't, I'd suggest just putting a little bit on. Pop that on, tighten it up by hand to start with. And Shimano actually recommend doing up to 40 Newton meters. You're probably not going to have a torque wrench to do that, but if you do, then right up to 40. If not, it's just pretty tight. You want to hold it right at the end and just pull it right up. And there shouldn't be any play in the rotor. So now it's time to fit the brake system. I'm just going to unravel it from how it was wound up. And I'm just going to slide that onto the handlebar. And I like to actually work from the top down. So I'm then going to attach it using a 2.5mm Allen key onto the fork. And then I'll attach the caliper onto the fork itself as well. So I'm just going to tighten up this 4mm bolt that's up here. And that will just allow me, when I work my way down, just to get the correct routing. That one's tightened up now. And I'll come down and do the fork bolt as well. So that just, it's like a little ferrule. You just swing it up and over, and then you just use a 2.5mm Allen key and just tighten that up. Leave it a little bit loose so you can actually then fiddle around with where you're going to put the cable routing. You see some people actually have the cable routing on the outside of the fork. I think it's much better and it's safer as well to have it on the inside. So if you just take it around from the cable routing around the back of the fork. I'm now just going to come on and I'm going to actually fit the brake caliper onto the fork. But to do this first, I'm actually going to need to look at brake mounts. Now I've got a 203mm disc rotor here, so I've got a 203mm specific brake mount for that as well. If you do have 160, for example, or 180mm, then you are going to need the right brake mount. So check that out before you go and buy your brake set. Before we assemble it, it's worth looking at these small spacers. There's actually 3 of them. And you want to put this concave one on last, and it's actually just going to rotate in that. So when you do tighten up, it's going to allow it to move a little bit just to set itself and get aligned when you come to tightening the caliper onto the fork. Okay, so let's bolt it up. So it is worth noting as well, you've got an up. So you've got the right direction, it is unidirectional, and you're going to have the bigger chunk of metal up at the top, and you're going to need the bigger bolt for that as well. So we'll start there, just put them together, and we'll pop that bolt through. And that'll hold it together to start with. You need your 5mm Allen key to tighten this one up. So you might, you can get away with it just by doing it with hand to start with, and then add in the bottom one. And we're going to tighten that up. You don't want to tighten it right up though, you want to keep it still a little bit loose, as we're actually going to adjust that in a second. And there we go, we've got the brake caliper fitted. So I've still got the caliper just a little bit loose so that when I actually come to set the brake and make sure that there's going to be no rubbing, it's actually got that room to move. I'm now going to put the front wheel in and we'll get to adjusting the brake in just a second. I'm just going to take my axle out of these Fox 36s and I'm going to slot that in. Put my axle back in using my 5mm Allen key. Going to tighten it up and also do up the pinch bolts. So with everything fitted now, we're actually just going to have to come down and center the actual caliper on the disc. So to do this, the best way that I've found to do it is if you just pull on your front brake and then you just come down, and with your caliper being a little bit loose, you just tighten up those 2 5mm bolts. Tighten them down and then we'll check and see if it spins freely. You might have to do this a couple of times. Don't worry if it doesn't work out first time. So I've still got a little bit of rub, so I'm going to reset that as well and just try it again. So I've got my brake fitted, it's centered, and there's no rubbing. The last thing to do is I'm going to fit my grip. but that's not too challenging. So for more great videos on GMBN, why don't you click up there for a mission control on how to use your brakes, and perhaps you need to cut your brake hoses now, you can click down there on how to bleed your Shimano brakes. But before you watch either of them, click right in the middle to subscribe. You get a great video every day of the week, and the best part is, it's absolutely free. If you enjoyed this one, then give us a thumb up like.